This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Books, PD products, science, fashion, and glam talk. From Bollywood to Hollywood, it's Meet and Greet with Dr. Afshan Hashmi, right here on K4HD Radio and Talk4 TV. And here's your host, international speaker, educator, award-winning entrepreneur, and best-selling author, Dr. Afshan Hashmi.
Hello everyone, this is your loving host and best-selling author and radio and TV personality Dr. Afshan Hashmi, live from her studio in Rockville, Maryland. And today folks, before I start my program, I want to remind you that these are my two books. The first one is The Modern Mughal Mentality, New Strategies to Succeed in India and the Global Marketplace. And the second one is The Outbreak of a Monstrous Infection. So I just wanted to remind you that please go and buy these two books, because these two books bring food to the table. And also I want a movie to be made of this book, this one, The Outbreak of a Monstrous Infection, and the script is ready. And the first one is The Modern Mughal Mentality, and it was Amazon bestseller and hot #1 new release in USA, and it was also Amazon bestseller in India, and this one was Amazon bestseller in USA. So having said that folks, I want a movie or a documentary to be made of this, and a movie or a web series made of it. So all those Hollywood, Bollywood, and whoever wants to contact me, Netflix and Amazon, whoever wants to contact me, please contact me at afshan@drafshanhashmi.com. Having said that folks, now we are going to talk about a movie, from how the movie is made from books to movies, that what is the procedure and all. And it was discussed in Library of Congress book festival couple of years back. And so today we will watch that movie, and please give me sponsorship, because this show is syndicated worldwide to 300 million listeners. So I just want these books, my books, to go into movies and see the procedure. It's a very interesting procedure and a very interesting movie, and it is 1 hour long, but there will be couple of sponsorship breaks. And so we will watch the movie. And for now then, and I am going to say cheers and bye bye.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to the second annual Books to Movies presentation here at the National Book Festival. My name is Mike Michon. I'm head of the Moving Image section at the Library of Congress. I'm very proud to represent my colleagues who work at the Packard Campus for Audiovisual Conservation in Culpeper, Virginia. It is a purpose-built facility. It was funded by David Woodley Packard expressly for the purpose of acquiring and cataloging, housing, preserving, and making accessible the world's largest collection of film, video, and sound recordings. For a lot of people who are not even aware that the library even has film and video collections, but they're the largest in the world. We have roughly 1.4 million moving image items in our collection. We have film dating back to 1891, the very first Edison camera test, up to all the current releases coming out today. So if you're worried about Minions being preserved for future generations, got you covered. Good. And we're especially delighted to be a part of this program tonight. there's one little, I was debating whether or not to talk about this, but I'm gonna use my opportunity here, my minute or two, for a little teachable lesson. Now, we're the copyright library of the United States. And so when film producers, television producers want to register the work for copyright, they have to submit a copy to the library. Now, you're familiar with this with books and all, but they do this for movies, television shows, documentary, Poodle Grooming with Debbie, you know, those sorts of video. It's a real title, by the way. You're familiar with that. But we are sort of we're in the end days of 35 millimeter film. It's very hard to see 35 millimeter these days. We still operate a film preservation laboratory. When we preserve film, we make new film copies, film on film. We have a lot of digital tools in the toolbox as well. But when I was asked to put together some clips for the second half of the program tonight, I had to get clips from the recent HBO documentary Going Clear and from The Woman in Gold, which was a film with Helen Mirren that was released earlier this year. And I will tell you, neither one of those clips looked particularly good. I had to rip them from DVD-Rs. Now, Woman in Gold, you know, is a major theatrical release, but the studios simply aren't making very many 35 millimeter prints anymore. They're making digital cinema packages, and they come encrypted to prevent piracy. Well, we can't preserve those at the library. We have to get them unencrypted. So we actually need a change to the copyright law. So when you see the clip tonight from Woman in Gold, you're going to see at the top, it says something like property of TWC. That's the Weinstein Company that released it. And another little bug in the lower right-hand corner that says US copyright. Okay? So instead of getting a nice 35 millimeter print of that film, we're now getting a watermarked DVD-R. So I'm sad about this. But I figured I would at very least give you a little teachable moment so you'd understand, so you wouldn't look at that and say, why couldn't that guy come up with something better? But we're going to have a really terrific program tonight. I'm glad to see we have such a great turnout tonight. And it is my very distinct pleasure to introduce to you, to start tonight's program, the chief film critic of the Washington Post, Ann Hornaday.
Thank you, Mike, and thank all of you for being here. This really is a great turnout. How many of you were here last year? We had fun, didn't we? We're going to have fun tonight. You know A. Scott Berg is the author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning biography of Charles Lindbergh. You know A. Scott Berg as the author of Wilson, his most recent book, the biography of Woodrow Wilson. But for our purposes here tonight, we're going to focus on his other work that includes books about Katharine Hepburn and William Wyler and Samuel Goldwyn. It includes a screenplay that he wrote in 1982 for a pivotal film called Making Love. It includes his personal history with the film business. It's literally in the family, so he has personal knowledge of that of which we speak tonight. And perhaps most important, his book, Max Perkins, Editor of Genius, is soon to be a major motion picture after a long and winding road, I might add, and I can't wait to get into the details of that. But he has a lot of wisdom to share, and he has very generously agreed to share a special part of it with us as the first part of the program, with a presentation about the history of Hollywood and filmmaking. I can't wait to see what he shows us and what he says, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce A. Scott Berg.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that was a real overpromise of wisdom. I'll give you a lot of talk. I don't know how much of it will be wisdom, but it will all be heartfelt. Books to movies is the main theme of all this. I mean, this is the National Book Festival. So what I was going to do with my time here, before we break into the panel in the next session, is to talk about not just books to movies, but about a book I wrote about the movies, a biography of Samuel Goldwyn, and to talk about the movies themselves and how you might even start to read movies, which is something I did. I am a biographer. I spend my life telling life stories. And I have now written 5 biographies, as you have heard. The first I did, it was based on my senior thesis in college. It was a biography of a man named Maxwell Perkins, who was a book editor by trade, who is most famous for basically discovering and developing the talents of F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, Thomas Wolfe, James Jones, Taylor Caldwell, Erskine Caldwell. I could mention another 24 authors who literally changed the course of the American river that we call American literature. I then did my book on Goldwyn, which I'll get back to in a minute, but I then did a book on Charles Lindbergh. I do my books because I decided very early on that I wanted to try to capture 20th century American culture in a shelf full of books. So after doing the story of Perkins, who was an East Coast 9th generation white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, my third book, and as I said, I'll jump back to number 2, was Lindbergh, who was a Midwesterner. That became a book about aviation, but also about modern celebrity. My next book that I was about to do was about Woodrow Wilson, who is a Southerner, as many of you know. It was a book, obviously, about politics, about government. It was also a book about higher education in this country, he having been a college professor and a college president for most of his career, in fact. Before I started that book, my publisher said, but gee, Scott, before you get into that Wilson book, it occurs to me, although you don't talk about it much, that you seem to sneak off on weekends with Katharine Hepburn. Is that true? Well, yes, it is true. Would you ever think about writing a book about her? And I said, well, yes, it's funny you should mention that because she has asked me on more than one occasion to write a book about her. And in fact, at one point, when I asked why it was so important, she thought, that she thought I should write a book about her, she explained quite simply, because I'm fascinating. And of course she was. And of course I did. And what happened is for 20 years in which we were friends, after almost every meal we had together, after every weekend, after every trip, whatever it was, she would say the same thing to me: go upstairs and write down everything I said. Why? You got it. So that has been how I've spent most of the last 45 years. Now, to go to book 2, right after my Max Perkins book, that's when I began to think of putting this apple pie together, of trying to tell the story of the 20th century through a half dozen books of American cultural figures. So after writing about the quintessential WASP, Harvard-educated East Coast book person, I began to think, what's the opposite of that? And I immediately thought, of course, of that remarkable first generation, a half dozen Jewish immigrants who had come to this country all within a few years of each other at the turn of the century, they all were born within 500 miles of each other back in Middle Europe. And none of them was educated. They all migrated to the West Coast and they started something new, something we now call Hollywood. And of all the moguls, the early moguls, there was one who really stood out as the quintessential mogul to me, the most interesting to me, and that was Samuel Goldwyn.
Hello viewers around the globe, this is Dr. Afshan Hashmi, live for her radio show at K4HD and Talk 4 TV show, and I just wanted to request you that please give me sponsorship if you want to want this show to continue. Having said that, friends, I will see you in another episode of K4HD Radio plus Talk 4 TV show, and if you give me sponsorship, I will give you very reasonable price, and also you will get lot of promotion as this show is syndicated worldwide to more than 300 million listeners. Cheers and bye bye.
And so he is the one I selected to become the subject of my second book. Now, there was one other really good reason for me to write about Sam Goldwyn, and that is I received a phone call just as I was going through this thought process from Samuel Goldwyn Jr. I mean, out of the blue came this call asking if I wanted to write a biography of his father. And he explained to me that before his father had died, he had promised that he would get a biographer to write about him. And the old man, old Sam Goldwyn, said, that's great. I want a biography written of me, but I want to be dead before it's published because I want the book to tell the truth. And this has always been a problem in writing about Hollywood figures because Hollywood itself is this great invention. These six moguls were self-inventors. They were all self-invented characters in point of fact. And the problem was trying to dig up actual hard facts on these people. In the case of Samuel Goldwyn, fortunately for me, he had kept all his archives, every one of his papers, and Sam Goldwyn Jr. was making them available to me. So when he approached me and asked if I wanted to write about his famous father, Samuel Goldwyn, he said, you will have access to all this material. Does that interest you? Yes. That definitely interested me. I said, but, you know, I'd take your word for it, but you're the son of Samuel Goldwyn Jr. I'd like to see what I will be dealing with. And he lived in Beverly Hills, and I went to visit him there, and there he said, look, here is a key, and here is an address of Lions Moving and Storage in the middle of Hollywood. Go down there, use this key when you get to the first of the three family vaults up there. And I went over, and well, I'll never forget driving over. It's a 6-story building. You took the elevator up to the top, got out, climbed up a fire escape, went across the roof, and then down another stairwell into a whole other part of a building that you couldn't normally access, and then down 2 long dark halls, and there at the end was a huge door with a padlock, and there was the key. So put the key in, turned on a light switch, 1 bulb hanging down in the middle of a room that I would say was probably 20 by 20 feet. It was completely surrounded by file cabinets. I went to the first file cabinet to see what I was dealing with, and I found papers going back relating to a man named Shmuel Gelbfish, who was a teenage runaway from Warsaw, Poland, who came to this country. I would later learn he stole the money to get to this country, did not come through the border normally. He was an illegal alien who jumped ship in Canada, having come over steerage, walked across the border somewhere in Maine, made his way by foot to New York City. Once he got there, he went to the Jewish sector of Manhattan, realized it was a Jewish ghetto just like the one he had run away from in Warsaw, wanted to get out of the city, heard about a place upstate called Gloversville, New York, where Shmuel Gelbfish changed his name to Samuel Goldfish. Samuel Goldfish became a glove maker and then a glove salesman. And then he moved to New York City, where he became the greatest glove salesman in the United States. And one day in 1913, he felt something was happening to the glove business, and it was about to suffer. And he walked one very hot August day for the first time into a movie theater in Times Square. And as he walked in, Bronco Billy, who was the biggest Western star of the silent screen at that moment, was riding along on a horse, and he made a leap onto a moving train. Well, Samuel Goldfish thought this was the most exciting thing he had ever seen, and he decided by the time he walked out of that theater that he was going to go into the film business. And that's what he did. He talked his brother-in-law, who was a vaudevillian named Jesse Lasky, into going into business with him. The two of them, they decided to option a play together, which they did, called The Squaw Man. Sam Goldfish thought this was the perfect vehicle for a movie because it was a Western and it was a love story. So he thought it would appeal to men and it would appeal to women. And he put it together. They decided to find a director. There was one man they wanted to go to. His name was William DeMille. And so they went to William DeMille's agent, who happened to be his mother. They said, Mrs. DeMille, we'd like to hire your son William to direct our first movie. And she said, well, he's very busy, you know, he's a very busy man, but I happen to have another son named Cecil. Now, yes, Cecil B. Well, has he ever directed anything? No, but he's a very good actor, and we're sure he could direct a movie. Well, she was a damn good agent, Mama DeMille, because they took a flyer on this guy, Cecil DeMille. They got on a train in New York City with a small crew and a small cast. They went to the end of the line, which was Flagstaff, Arizona. They were going to film the Western out there. Then Cecil DeMille and crew walked outside, looked around. It didn't look at all the way Cecil DeMille thought the West should look. So they got back on another train, which was then going to go to the end of that line, which landed in Los Angeles. And after a few days in Los Angeles, Goldfish, he's still back in New York, he's minding the store, while Jesse Lasky and DeMille are out there now in Los Angeles, and they find a barn in the middle of some orange groves where they decided to film their movie. And reputedly, Lasky swears this is true, so I'm sure it's false. It's Hollywood. But he said that he sent a telegram back to Sam Goldfish saying, have rented a barn in a place called Hollywood. And there they made the first feature film ever made in a place called Hollywood. Now, this is pretty exciting stuff. So I'm finding all this just going through files. This is awfully exciting. So now I'm really revved up about all this. So I decide just to start opening drawers, whatever I can find. I find that indeed when Goldfish decided to go into the movie business and was going to send Cecil DeMille on this train, the first person he talked to about how to make a movie was Thomas Edison. Imagine this, all right? Edison. Who better? How to make a movie, the guy who invented it. Okay. Now I went to the very last drawer, and the very last drawer had the phone sheet that Samuel Goldwyn's secretary kept every time somebody placed a phone call to him. He had had a stroke in his late 80s. The last call to come in before he had his stroke was from Warren Beatty. And I realized everything in between in all these file cabinets would allow me to document the story of Hollywood between Thomas Edison and Warren Beatty. That was a story I wanted to tell. So not only did I spend the next year and a half going through hundreds of thousands of documents, I spent much of the next few years interviewing about 150 people, most of whom were from the golden age of Hollywood. I was able to interview Olivia de Havilland, Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn during that period, Myrna Loy, Sylvia Sidney, Joel McCrea, the great directors, William Wyler, George Cukor, King Vidor, Henry King, Henry Hathaway. I mean, virtually any actor, writer, director who was alive from the golden era, who had worked with Samuel Goldwyn, I was able to see. 150 interviews. I should hasten to add that about 110 of them died before my book was published. Now, Hollywood is a small town, and word began to spread that when you get a call from Scott Berg for your interview, don't say yes. Oh no, it's your time. It's time for the interview. Oh yes. Come quietly, come gently. You'll be. Well, anyway, interview I did. Now, I want to get into some film clips here. I was also fortunate enough because Samuel Goldwyn, who later changed his name from Goldfish to Goldwyn when he went into business with the Selwyn brothers, so they could have either formed Goldwyn Pictures or Selfish Productions. Far more apt, but they went with Goldwyn, which sounded like a winner, you know, a gold win. So that was kind of great. Now, Samuel Goldwyn got kicked out of what initially became Paramount Pictures. That's when he went into business with the Selwyns, formed the Goldwyn Company, which went into business with Louis B. Mayer and the Metro Company. He got kicked out of what became Metro Goldwyn Mayer. He's gone from that one now. He finally realizes, maybe I should work alone. Maybe I have a personality problem. And indeed, Samuel Goldwyn started his own independent film company called Goldwyn Pictures. He made 80 motion pictures as himself, as produced by Samuel Goldwyn. That is to say, every one of these movies he financed himself, he owned himself, he personally selected which movies of the thousands, the 10,000s of alternatives, of options that cross a producer's desk in a lifetime. He selected which ones he would make.
Hello everyone around the world. This is Dr. Afshan Hashmi and with K4HD Radio and Talk 4 TV. And dear friends, I am live in Maryland in a country club, and I just wanted to say that please give me sponsorship if you want these shows to go on, because it takes not as much effort as money to produce these kinds of shows. Having said that, friends, please give me sponsorship, and cheers and bye-bye.
And so of those 80 films, I began to think, and this is what I would like you to consider tonight when I run a few clips for you. Do these clips reveal anything about Samuel Goldwyn, the person? I'm a biographer. I want to illuminate his life. Are there some little nuggets in any of these films that tell me what made him tick, that tell me who he was? Then, you know, the job of a biographer is not just to tell a life, but to tell about the world in which a subject lives. So do any of these clips, in fact, reveal anything about Hollywood as Hollywood was developing over the 50 years or so that he was making movies? Does it tell anything about the country in which Samuel Goldwyn lived? Indeed, does it tell us anything about the world? Anything perhaps about the human experience? So that's what I wanted to do in the book when I was watching the movies, and also I want to do for you tonight in the next few minutes. So Samuel Goldwyn, with his own company now, is rolling along. He's a very successful producer of silent films. He's doing extremely well, especially in the mid-1920s. He has now developed two big silent screen stars. They are Ronald Colman and Vilma Banky. And you know, well, I'm going to show you a clip of the two of them in a movie called The Winning of Barbara Worth, which was based on a book by a very popular author of the day named Harold Bell Wright. And you will see, and this is one of the great ironies to me about Goldwyn and about so many of the other moguls, these semi-literate men, how often, and in fact, the less literate they were, the more they relied on more serious literature. So here is a clip from a movie that came out in late 26, early 27, called The Winning of Barbara Worth. And God's willing, here we go. Silent movies, by the way, were never silent. When you went to even a small theater in Iowa, or if you went to a big theater in New York City, there was always musical accompaniment. But there's Ronald Colman and Vilma Banky, and you're about to meet an actor. This is his first featured film. A man named Frank Cooper, whose agent said, "Why don't you name yourself after my little town in Indiana?" And thus, Gary Cooper. And watch the staging of the scene, which was by Henry King, a great director. He told me when he staged this scene, he recognized Gary Cooper was a new style of acting. And he said, when I did this scene, you can see the old style walking off the screen, and you're left with that. Now, months after this movie came out, Goldwyn has these two huge stars. It was a huge hit, this movie. The Jazz Singer opened. Suddenly we have talking pictures. Ronald Colman, I found in the files, had sent a letter to Sam Goldwyn saying, "Sam, these silent movies, I think they're not going to last. Surely you will not put me in any of them, not with my voice." Ronald Colman, if you don't know, had one of the most beautiful voices ever in movies. Vilma Banky, unfortunately, spoke only Hungarian, with a very thick Hungarian accent. So that was the end of Vilma Banky's career, I'm afraid. And in fact, there were only two silent screen stars who went on to have even bigger talking picture careers, and they are Ronald Colman and Greta Garbo. Now, Goldwyn's next picture, as he starts to get into talking pictures, his next big picture was his first all-talking movie. This came out in 1930. This is a movie called Bulldog Drummond. And I'm going to run this clip for you, which is kind of wonderful. Oh, I just did something terrible here. Uh-oh. Let's see what happens. The scene, as you will see, is really about sound itself. You could now go to the movies and you could hear the gong of a clock. Silence. Now, people were hearing sounds from a screen they had never heard before. Microphones were very crude, rudimentary. You couldn't even hear all the dialogue. You could hear a spoon drop in a movie theater. This was breathtaking.
The eternal din in this club is an outrage.
The eternal din.
I ask you, what?
You're perfectly right, Colonel. We ought to complain. Do you know that's the third spoon I've heard drop this month?
And there's Ronald Ford.
Somebody would throw a bomb and wake the place up.
You could go to the movies and hear a man whistle. They were making so many movies with people whistling in them. In 1929 and 1930, they were, as a gag, people were calling them whistlies. And now all the studios are making musicals. I mean, they're really beefing up just to do anything they could to show what you could now do in a motion picture. And indeed, it was at this time, musicals were starting to get people were getting sick and tired of musicals. And it was at this moment that Goldwyn decided to make his first movie musical, that is. And for that, he went to New York and he found an actor whom he turned into the biggest movie star in the world at that time. He made musicals. Any of you have a clue who it was? Well, I'll give you a, whoop, there we go. Let's see if we get it. There's a movie called Whoopi. The star was Eddie Cantor, huge star of radio, screen, Ziegfeld Follies.
Every time I hear that dear old wedding march, I feel rather glad I have a broken heart. I have heard a lot of married people talk, and I know that marriage is a long, long walk. To most people, weddings mean romance, but I prefer a picnic or a dance. Another bride, another groom, the countryside is all in bloom. The flowers and trees, the birds and bees are making whoopee. Quiet thing, here comes the bride, another victim is by her side. He's lost his reason, 'cause it's the season for making whoopee.
That's
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Afshan Hashmi live from a barn country club in Virginia, and I just wanted to say that my K4HD radio and Talk 4 TV show called Meet and Greet with Dr. Afshan Hashmi is syndicated worldwide and has more than 300 million listeners. And if you want these shows to continue, please give a sponsorship, and I request to please give a sponsorship because these shows require a lot of energy and money to produce. So I would request everyone to give me sponsorship, and your product will be promoted in a very reasonable price, and you can contact me at afshan@drafshanhashmi.com. Cheers and bye bye.
That's all you get of that. You can see what a super talent this man was, though. And he made musicals for Goldwyn for the next 10 years, in fact. Now, Goldwyn came up with a nice formula. He would alternate between silly musical comedies, and indeed, that one, Whoopi, was the first one to employ the talents of a choreographer who had never worked in movies named Busby Berkeley. And Goldwyn actually brought him out to Hollywood, and of course Busby Berkeley revolutionized the movie musical. Now he would alternate these silly musical comedies with serious drama, Goldwyn was making films based on very important stage plays such as Sinclair Lewis's Dodsworth. He did another one based on Aerosmith by Sinclair Lewis, Dead End, the play by Sidney Kingsley. So there was some very high-minded literature that Goldwyn was really transforming into very exciting motion pictures. And then in 1939, which is the golden year in all of Hollywood history, Sam Goldwyn produced a script that had been kicking around Hollywood for years. And it was kicking around because, well, it was based on what was considered a very serious but a very dark book. And that book was Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights.
Heathcliff.
And here you have Merle Oberon and Laurence Olivier in his first important role.
Still and never move again. Make the Moors never change, and you and I never change.
The Moors and I will never change. Don't you, Kathy?
I can't. No matter what I ever do or say, Heathcliff. This is me now. Standing on this hill with you. This is me forever.
Yes, those are the fabled moors of Chatsworth, California.
Heathcliff, when you went away, what did you do? Where did you go?
This was Goldwyn's favorite movie, and I think here's the reason why.
One night I shipped for America on a brigantine going to New Orleans. We were held up by the tide, and I lay all night long on the deck. thinking of you, and the years and years ahead without you. I jumped overboard and swam ashore.
I think I'd have died if you hadn't.
Kathy, you're not thinking of that other world now.
Smell the heather. Fill my arms with heather. All they can hold. Come on.
Kathy, you're still my queen.
You see, Heathcliff really had the ultimate American dream story. He made it big in America, and then he came back. The heather was shipped from Yorkshire to Chatsworth. That's the movie that made Laurence Olivier a movie star, in fact. The reason this movie got made, really, is that in the late 30s, war was starting to ratchet up in Europe. And in fact, Franklin Roosevelt put it out there to the moguls of Hollywood. I want to get us into this war, and we need to start building spirit for our English cousins. And he asked all the studio moguls if they would make very pro-British films. So this is how films like Pride and Prejudice and Wuthering Heights began to flood the market in the late 30s and early 40s. By 1941, of course, we were in the war. Into 1942, the government basically said, we need propaganda movies, in essence, but out of Hollywood. I mean, don't make them just obviously propaganda. Make pro-American movies, maybe movies about American heroes. And this was Samuel Goldwyn's contribution, The Pride of the Yankees, the story of Lou Gehrig and his most famous scene.
And father.
Gary Cooper, of course.
Who fought to give me health. And a solid background in my youth. I have a wife, a companion for life, who has shown me more courage than I ever knew. People all say that I've had a bad break. But today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
For those of you who say Gary Cooper could only say, yup, yes, that is Babe Ruth as Babe Ruth. Great scene.
Hello viewers around the globe, this is Dr. Afshan Hashmi live for her radio show at K4HD and Talk 4 TV show, and I just wanted to request you that please give me sponsorship if you want this show to continue. Having said that, friends, I will see you in another episode of K4HD Radio plus Talk 4 TV show, and if you give me sponsorship, I will give you very reasonable price, and also you will get lot of promotion as this show is syndicated worldwide to more than 300 million listeners. Cheers and bye bye.
Great scene. Once again, Goldwyn keeps going, alternating. He had discovered a new star named Danny Kaye. So he would alternate Danny Kaye musicals with more serious dramas. I'm going to show you a clip of one of Samuel Goldwyn's most celebrated movies, again, based on a piece of literature, based on Lillian Hellman's play, The Little Foxes. Lillian Hellman, who I obviously got to interview, yeah, she died too before the book came out. Oh, darn. But anyway, She said, and with very good reason, and for the scene I'm about to show you, that she thought the film of The Little Foxes played better than any versions of the play could. And it was for this one scene in particular, in which Bette Davis, whom Samuel Goldwyn got out of her ironclad Warner Brothers contract for this one movie because of a poker debt Jack Warner just was unable to pay. And he said, is there any way I could work off this debt? And he said, yes, Bette Davis. No, I can't loan out Bette Davis. Well, what if I give you Gary Cooper to play Sergeant York? Okay, so he did, and she did, and they did, and anyway, they made this scene in which Bette Davis plays the most vile, greediest woman who ever lived, and her husband holds all the cards, but he is about to die. And he's got a very weak heart, and he needs his heart medicine, as you will now see. Now, the thing to look at, and this is an interesting piece of filmmaking, Samuel Goldwyn had developed a cameraman over many years who became what I still think is the greatest cinematographer in movie history, a man named Greg Toland. He is most famous for being the cameraman on Citizen Kane, but he cut his teeth on 25 Goldwyn pictures before and after he did Citizen Kane. And here you'll see something Toland developed called deep focus, in which by using a certain kind of lens and lighting the two areas of the stage differently, brightening the background and keeping it a little darker in the foreground, you could capture two different playing areas at once. And so here's the scene from Little Foxes that Lillian Hellman thought really clinched it. That's Herbert Marshall playing her husband. Now watch Bette Davis.
Yeah,
there's not a word she speaks.
My room, in the drawer. Daddy, upstairs, quick.
The score to this movie, by the way, was written by Meredith Willson long before he wrote The Music Man. And look at Bette Davis. Oh. Doesn't have to speak. And I should tell you, Herbert Marshall, the actor, had a wooden leg. So the staggering, well, and they couldn't really film him climb stairs. And so William Wyler, the great director, staged the scene so that he would walk off camera. And then his body double would go up the stairs. It's a great scene, great scene. Now, America does go to war. America comes home from war. This is a time Hollywood decided not to do anything that had to do with war. Everyone was sick of war movies. This is the moment that Sam Goldwyn, this independent filmmaker going against all those big studios, Paramount, MGM, that kicked him out, Warner Brothers, Universal, all the others. Sam Goldwyn at this moment decides to make his war movie. Actually, he decides to make a post-war movie. He makes the first and the most important and the best post-war movie ever made. It's called The Best Years of Our Lives. It was originally based on a magazine article that Mrs. Goldwyn had read in Time magazine about the trouble soldiers were having readjusting to civilian life. Goldwyn decided there was a movie there. He gave it to an author, McKinley Cantor, to write a book. And McKinley Cantor went off and wrote a book based on this. Little did Goldwyn know it would come back written in poetry. Goldwyn said, I don't know what to do with this. And it wasn't until William Wyler, the great director, Goldwyn's great director, came back from the war, severely injured. He had lost much of his hearing. He fell in love with this story. He wanted to tell the story of soldiers coming home, a rather universal story. And this one scene I'm about to show you, I think it's just the greatest single moment in post-war film. And it captures not just the moment in the characters' lives here, but it captured the homecoming moment of every American family, every family around the world.
Hello everyone, this is Dr. Afshan Hashmi live from a barn country club in Virginia, and I just wanted to say that my K4HD radio and Talk 4 TV show called Meet and Greet with Dr. Afshan Hashmi is syndicated worldwide and has more than 300 million listeners. And if you want these shows to continue, please give a sponsorship, and I request to please give a sponsorship because these shows require a lot of energy and money to produce. So I would request everyone to give me sponsorship, and your product will be promoted in a very reasonable price, and you can contact me at afshan@drafshanhashmi.com. Cheers and bye bye.
You've been listening to Meet and Greet with Dr. Afshan Hashmi on K4HD Radio and Talk 4 TV. Tune in live right here every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Would you love exposure to your business, product, or service to over 300 million potential listeners? Send an email to info@talk4media.com. And remember, if you missed any part of this show or want to hear it again, find our featured show on iHeartRadio or YouTube, where all past episodes are available on demand 24/7. See you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on K4HD and Talk 4 TV.